Hello people, well here we are again. This is another thing which is not a radio, which we do have occasionally. Obviously this is a cassette deck from the early 1970s really. I think it was maybe between 72, 75, something like that. As such, this is a pretty solid thing. It does feel a little bit wobbly here, but that's because some of the rubber has come off one of the feet, but that'll be easy enough to fix. But yeah, all the controls have a nice sort of satisfying feel to them and seem to operate correctly. We don't have the soft eject, that obviously hadn't been invented by then, so it's a bit springy, but who cares. For its age it doesn't look too bad. There's the odd dent and scratch and sort of happens to this chrome stuff. In terms of facilities, it's pretty much got what you'd expect for that sort of time. We've got microphone inputs left and right, we've got phono inputs on the back. We have a quick look at that. So we've got a DIN input or DIN input output connector and phonos for input output here. Obviously some trims coming off as well, which are not brilliant. The only thing that seems a bit odd to me is I would have expected that we'd have had mic inputs on these faders here and line inputs on these or something like that. But actually, I mean, you can't quite see. If I go in a bit closer on the legends, you can see what we actually have is record level for either mic or line and playback level. I've not normally seen playback levels on cassette decks. I didn't think it was particularly necessary in most cases. These things tend to be at a standard level, which is 200 to 300 millivolts for domestic equipment, but I suppose this gives you a little bit more flexibility. But why you need these, I would have gone for separate mic and line inputs, or having the separate mic and line inputs level controlled here, but that's not what they did, so we're stuck with that. Looking up here, apart from having analog VU meters, which is always nice, we always like those, we've got some other controls. We've got this thing called skip. I'm guessing that's to do with the fast forward, temporary fast forward. I'm not sure how, because I don't see how it's linked to this transport. I'll have a look at the manual and see if I can find out what that does. Then you've got a Dolby switch here, which is a bit intermittent. Oh well, I don't know, I haven't turned it on electrically yet, but it doesn't always latch. It should latch, but it doesn't always. So that's something we need to look at. Also on the tape selection, we've got bias and EQ for normal and chrome. Why would you want to have that? I'm not sure. Why don't you just have a normal selector which says whether you're using ferric or chrome? I think actually there were ferrichrome tapes, and I can't remember whether there was one of them where you had the bias for a chrome tape but the EQ for a ferric tape. I'm not sure. Anyway, I can't see as I'd ever use that other than by doing either that or that, so to me it should be just one control. Again, mechanically these are not in the best state. And then we've got the mono or stereo mode, which I'm guessing if you only have one microphone you can put it into mono mode and plug it into one of these jacks, probably the left one. This thing here is supposed to be a little pilot light, so that goes around with the tape counter, and I think there's supposed to be some sort of cover over here, but we haven't got it. Otherwise our usual tape transport controls and an electrical pause, which I'm guessing just switches the motor off. This came with a BASF C90 cassette, which looks about the 1970s period from the look of it, and it says on here, I don't know if you can see that, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd on that one, and Mike Oldfield Tubular Bells on the other. How much more 70s can we get? Obviously you can't hear anything from this, it hasn't got any speakers, so I'm going to have to plug it in through the mixer, and I'll rig that all up and we'll come back and see what we can get from it. So I should be getting some output from the tape, and I'm not. Let's try it again, just push those up. Absolutely nothing there. And it stops after a while. Now I think that may be due to the fact I can see that the... Well, it certainly doesn't sound much like Dark Side of the Moon, does it? Sounds like we've got a lot of instability there in the audio stage. Also, the tape counter's not going round, that pilot thing is not going round either. I'm guessing the reason it stops is because it's not detecting any motion of the tape, and that has triggered the auto stop. So that's another thing we need to look at, but it doesn't seem to be any audio from there. What I'm also going to try is just doing a feed through on record and see if the audio path from record to playback is okay. So if we put something in the record input, we should be able to hear it on the output. So let's try doing that.
When you've got great produce like this, you don't do too much to it. Right?
No, exactly. And we try to...
So the left channel seems to work going through the record path, but the right hand doesn't. Oddly enough, the playback level doesn't seem to have any effect there when I've got it in record mode. I suppose that's right.
Crazy. Although sometimes, I suppose, on the tasting menu can go a bit mad, but...
It's fine if I put it into mono, though. So there's quite a few things wrong with this. You can see also when you've got it in record, what I've done obviously is just push a little tab back here and put the record and play down, and then put the pause on, because then it doesn't keep knocking itself out because it thinks this isn't going round. But as you can see, when you're in record, the little pilot rotator thingy goes red instead of white. So that's another cool thing. So there's a lot of things to look at here. Mechanical bits around here, it's probably just a belt come off that's driving this, so that probably is very easy. Nothing from the playback is that could be an easy thing, in that some capacitor's gone somewhere or something like that, or a switch is a bit iffy, and we know we've got to clean up these switches anyway because that doesn't latch properly. On the other hand, it could be an open circuit head, in which case we're stuffed. We're not going any further with this if that happens. So hopefully that's not the case, because it does feel as if it's pretty solid and ought to be something that we'd like to rescue and have as a thing that people could use. So I'm in two minds as to whether we'll get anywhere with this. I'm expecting dismantling to be a bit of a struggle in getting at the electrical components or whatever, but we'll take it apart and see how we get on. Right, I've taken the bottom off it, and you can see it's pretty packed really. We can see all the boards, but we can't see the top end and see what we're looking at. I have got the manual for this, so perhaps I should look a bit more at it to see what to take out next. There's some screws here, which I'm guessing I've taken the fader knobs off of the front. So having done that, I'm hoping that taking a few screws out here, the whole chassis will pull out. So we'll try that next. There's a real gotcha here with getting this out, is that you take all these things out and it doesn't seem to move. There's these two screws, quite small screws really, in the cassette compartment, and they bear quite a lot of load. When you take those out, the whole thing appears to drop, so that gets us a bit further. Right, so here it is out of the case, or with the case pushed up to one side because the mains lead is sort of holding it in, and we can see this mechanism here for the pilot control. Now if that, there's a lot of dust here, but if that goes round here, the pilot control isn't moving, but I see there is a belt there, although it looks a bit sad and slack. So I think it's the fact that that belt is not turning this round, and I think that thing there, I'm guessing that thing there's a sensor that is required to make the thing keep turning. We weren't sure about the head. The head is there. I can see connections to it look to be okay. I can't see that there's a problem with those, and we'll probably have to follow this through to the boards. Also, we're going to have to get these out to somehow get to the back of these to get at the mechanism to sort out the fact that this isn't latching properly. So I think a good clean for a start, blow the dust off it, and then start looking at further dismantling. Okay, we've got good news and bad news. The good news is I put new belts on here, so if I put a cassette into it and I press play, which I think is that one, you can see that the pilot thingy now goes around. Oh, by the way, more good news. I found the cover for it. This was inside the box, so we've still got the cover. It just fell off inside, so that's good news as well. And you can see that goes around, and it's not auto stopping now. And the counter's going round. All seems quite good. Unfortunately, I'm guessing we won't get a copyright strike on that one. Let's try. We only get one channel, and it's got a sort of motorboating on it, and it feels like it's at the wrong speed. The motorboating's gone away, but the speed, as you can see, is a bit incorrect. Now, you might also have noticed that, as I sort of guessed earlier, this is not Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. I think what's happened here is some chap in the 1970s had a recording of Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield and Dark Side of the Moon, left it at home, went off to university or something, came back, and his younger brother had recorded the top 40 over it. How that must have pleased him. Anyway, it's good for us because we've got an archive of a top 40 programme from the 1970s, which is always interesting to listen to. Or is it top 20? I think it's probably top 20 with Tom Brown on Radio 1 or something like that. Anyway, we're not hearing it in very good quality. I played the tape on a proper cassette recorder, and the tape itself is fine. It doesn't sound like actually played in one that's working. So, now I'll tell you something else as well. Let's put it back in play. This skip button, I couldn't work out what it's for. I've looked at the manual now, and what it does is it makes the tape speed faster, so you can spin through bits you don't like or find bits. So now, interestingly, it sounded to me, and that might just be a side effect of it running at a higher speed, but it sounded to me like when it was running at high speed, the speed was more stable than when it was running at normal speed. So that tends to suggest to me it's the electronics driving the capstan motor that is not quite giving the right voltage or whatever. So maybe we need to do some measurements on that and see what we're getting on there. Also, that motorboating that we're getting on the channels there, and it seems to be mostly on the right hand channel. I don't know what's causing that, but again, it could be just a bad connection somewhere. I think the first thing to do is I'll have a look at the motor speed and see what that's supposed to be, and I haven't got anything to measure it with, but I should be able to tell whether it's got a stable voltage going to it or not.
Still at number 7 is the Stylistics with 16 bars and down to number 6, Wings.
Yeah, 16 bars, 8 points, 4 punch-ups and 2 asbos. The story of the Stylistics gig at the Batley Variety Club in 1976. I have actually tracked down the date of this chart. It would have been the weekend in the 18th of September, looking back at the records and comparing them with the chart positions. Anyway, as you can hear, it's working again. Not brilliant quality recording, obviously. I suspect it wasn't recorded on this machine, because when I checked it, the alignment wasn't that far out, although as we know the speed was. Now, as you might notice, there's a little hole in the top of the motor here, and you can put a screwdriver in there and adjust the speed, which I've done, and I think that pot was a bit dirty, so hence it was wobbling about a bit, and having moved that around a bit and tweaked it to the right speed, things are okay. I've taken the bulb out of here because it's got a bit dark outside, and having the light on between the meters was completely wiping out the exposure on the camera, so that's the only reason I've done that. It hasn't gone wrong. I need to remember to put it back in again before I put it back together. Now, what else have we done? Mostly it's been cleaning the multi-way switch, which is operated when you press record. That switch, having got tons of contacts, is quite key to the functioning of it, and if it's not absolutely clean, you get this motorboating, or you get oscillations, or you get intermittent audio, and it's not particularly easy to get at. Originally I tried taking out these faders. You can't get this bit of metal out that holds them in, but you can unscrew them here and then get at the switch through there. I've just unplugged it there because there's lots of nasty live mains. For example, this lovely 240 volts fuse here, I think it is, which you can just put your fingers on. Yeah, the switch, you can see the tracks, the PCB connections for it there, and the only way I could in the end get it, I had to unscrew that and lift it out, but you can't lift it completely out because there's so many wires on this. I mean, I'm glad I didn't have to change any components on this board. That would have been a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. I also changed this belt here. Now, it's not the best. It's a bit wow and flutter is not brilliant on this, and I've ordered a belt that is more of the correct dimensions, and hopefully that will improve things. To change this belt, you have to unscrew these 2 screws here and pull this little plate out, which allows you to get the belt out if you have one of these and wish to change it. But it's quite important that it's not too tight. It goes the other way around this, and this is a take-up spool, and if it's too tight, the take-up spool thing gets pushed out of the way, and the take-up spool doesn't, because there's an idler on the back of this, so it drives the take-up spool. This gets pushed out of the way, take-up spool doesn't rotate. You get tape going everywhere like you used to do in the old days, and you have to go and get a pencil and wind it all back in, and it's not nice. So yeah, I'm going to try and get a better belt for this, which I think will improve matters. I'm not entirely sure about the construction of this. I mean, it feels pretty solid. I noticed they've wire wrapped pretty much every interboard connection, and I don't know whether there's actually any solder on those. I think maybe a little bit, but that to me seems not a long-term thing. It's certainly not a maintenance-friendly piece of kit. Nevertheless, I think it's in reasonable condition now. I'm going to put it back in the case because I can change the belt while it's in the case. I've cleaned the case up, glued the cover for the rotating pilot light back on, and that bit of trim that was coming off. I'm just going to put it back together now, and we'll have a final look at it. Actually, the new drive belt arrived in the post much sooner than I expected, so I thought I'd carry on here and change it. This is a bit of an off-tube commentary. I didn't record any sound while I was doing this. I thought I'd just show briefly what we had to do. And as you can see, we take out these screws here. There's 3 of them, including one that holds a little clamp that keeps the wires in place, and when you've taken those out, the plate can be slid out, and at that point you can get access to the belt to remove it. Now, before I replaced that belt, I actually ran it through the scope, so you can see the wow and flutter that's happening here. You can see the 2 sine waves, or the left and right channels, are wobbling about. So actually the wow and flutter was quite audible with that replacement belt in, which wasn't quite the right one. Okay, so we've put the new belt in, we'll put the test tape in and see what we get now.
Speed calibration tones, 3000 Hertz.
And I think you can see it's a lot more stable on the scope. I've also got the wow and flutter meter here, and that looks quite high to me. I mean, it's around 0.16 or something like that. I thought that was ridiculously high, but then you look at the spec and it says it should be less than 0.13. So back in the early 70s, it wasn't ever supposed to be as good as the later cassette decks were in the 80s. And you wouldn't expect this to be as good now as it was before, but it's tolerable, and I think it could possibly be improved by changing the idler tyres, but I don't have any of those, and it's a bit of a hit and miss thing to get those and get the right sizes. So I'm just going to leave it as it is, but we'll have a quick demo of it, record and play on it to see what it's like. Now, it's only fair to say that what you just heard was shite. Samuel Scheidt, the German composer of the 17th century, and that's the first movement of his Battle Suite. For some reason, my career in the BBC didn't include a stint as a Radio 3 announcer. I think you have to agree that this isn't bad for a 50-year-old cassette deck. But I think the measured performance doesn't tell the whole story. There is a big difference between the sort of tapes you use there. When I first tried that demo, and I didn't show you that bit, I used one of these random tapes, which is probably about 30 years old. We got it from Woolworths or something like that. And then I tried it, and the one we actually heard was using a proper TDK-SA tape, which is from much older tape than that, but a proper, decent tape. And that's a lot better. And this certainly has survived a lot better than Woolworths has, hasn't it, with a bit of extra work that we've done on it. It strikes me that the sort of cassette revival which people keep talking about doesn't appear to have been matched by a revival of the manufacture of decent cassette tapes. Most of what you buy off Amazon turns out to be a bit pants, to be honest, and doesn't get the best out of your deck. Anyway, there we go. The Pioneer CTF-4141A. What a lovely piece of hi-fi. I'll see you on the next one.